Just double check everything's working.
Yeah. Got caught up in a conversation with the girl. She came home for dinner, and I thought she was going to get a call. She got a call, rather, and then her partner took.
Mic check. Good to go. Alright. So we've been talking for the last 3 weeks or so about place cells and what exactly it is that they do and their purpose. And we're going to go do a little quick overview of everything right now. And essentially, this first one is going to be showing the different place fields that are firing as this rat is walking through its maze. And these are operating in conjunction with head direction cells. And what this is creating is it's rendering reality as you experience it. And creating like the primitives or the way in which you see things.
A group of researchers led by Nobel Prize winner.
Can I
Go for it.
Can I ask a question on that one? So I know that in the prior ones we were kind of learning about, and that had more to do with a boxed room or when they're on the treadmill. But it seemed like the cell coordination was to the specificity of location. So if the blue were firing, that would be at the start, and then it would move to the green, and like obviously those colors are assigned for testing purposes. But even in that one, they were kind of intermixed. There was a progression to it that you could see that it was firing in different locations as it went. I wonder if those are correlations, like, hey, this area looks like that one.
Yes.
I don't know if you can tell from just the images shown in that.
Okay.
But
I get the question. So
yeah,
there's that prism thing that he was showing, right? The tetrodes that they actually put in the mouse's head.
Right.
Is not as clear a picture as we would want it to be, because we're talking about single neurons and one neuron firing, and when you're looking at these neurons from the top, it's like I think it's this one. You know what I'm saying? I think it's this one, but it could be this one. And then a lot of those misfires, quote unquote, are also the head direction cells. So in one direction it will be this color, but in the other direction it could be the other color. Does that make sense?
It's the prism's in 1080p, but the brain is activated in like 12K, and so you're just getting like a lower resolution picture of those AOs.
Yeah, but also if you look, you'll see him turn. The mouse will turn, and then the colors change. See, that's the head direction cells. So in this general vicinity, this one cell, this one blue cell is here. This is the place fire of this place cell.
And but what's really curious is, so as it's facing what would be for the screen west, it's the dark blue. And then as it faces east, it's back to dark blue. It almost feels like those correlations are like, okay, this is pre-curve noting. Is this color? Like, I understand that pre-curvature of this area, like these look familiar. So it's the same activation of the brain. I don't know if we let it run, if that's correlating even further down the path, or if it's assigning new areas to those. Like, you see the dark blue there again, but it's really focused in that area, and new shit's activating. Then we have light blue and back to dark. And it feels like the light blue is correlated to a speed increase.
Potentially. This also, there's not very much information about this specific video, but it does look like there's multiple
2 months ago, a group of
ideas going on there of like which cells are being utilized.
Yeah, and maybe I'm focusing too much on the hardware there, but it does seem to be that there is a correlation to the activations of those sectors based on the familiarity of that terrain. Kind of looks like it.
And when they're only tracking one place cell, it will only fire in like a generalized area. You won't have that firing like in the top corner.
No, not at all. So I mean, if you were to take all the other firings away and just focus on the red, you're going to have far less of that going on. But I wonder if you'd be able to tell even more specifically what that area of the brain is focusing on. Like, is that it looked like in that video, like orange is more tied to like deviation from the path. I don't know. That's really cool. I'd like to see more of that.
we're talking about today deals with grid cells. It's a group of neurons found in the entorhinal cortex, a structure which sends its connections to the hippocampus, and together they form a system for spatial navigation. I already made a video on hippocampus, place cells, and how they map animals' position in space, so you might want to check it out right here, or down in the description.
We've already
Grid cells
watched
are a bit
that
different.
video.
They
Yeah.
provide a coordinate system for the brain. You might recall from high school, there are Cartesian coordinates and polar coordinates to a specified position, using either x and y variables or r and theta variables, respectively. Well, it turns out that the brain uses a different approach. The environment is tiled with hexagonal grids of different scale and orientation.
So this idea right here is the grid cells are continuous, right? It does not matter about, they don't remap. It's the same map every time. So if this grid cell always fires with this scale, right, this top one, how it's larger, the scale of each individual firing point is this. That cell will always fire like that, as opposed to place cells, which can remap. The entirety of place cells can remap.
Sure.
So.
And the video we just watched is on place cells, and this one is on grid, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, partially.
Single grid cell is firing extensively when the animal is at any of the vertices of this grid. And these patches of ground where neuron is the most active are called the firing fields of that cell. Grid cells that are physically located close to each other in the brain usually have the same orientation and the same scale of this grid. It's just that their firing fields are shifted with respect to one another. In this case, they are said to belong to the same module. Cells that are more distant and have the different scale and orientation thus belong to a different module. And this modular organization allows the brain to uniquely decode the animal's position in space by converging the signals from different modules.
So this, I had like a fucking epiphany like yesterday or the day before. But you remember how I was showing you those hexagons?
Mm-hmm.
The different scale and orientation would be, you have one hexagon is one size, the other hexagon is a completely different size,
right?
But it would fit inside of the other points of the original one.
Right. Now, is there a correlation between those sizes? I feel like there was. The only number I can remember right now is the 7.5. The orientation to a blank space is about 7.5. But those have to be relative in some way too. That if you were to
Because
mathematically
the activity of a single grid cell
break them.
Can you see this?
I'm switching over to it. There we go. Yeah.
So this would be one module, right? These dots here. And if this scale was bigger, let's say I just did like this, that would be a scaling difference.
Right, and that's the new sector of the brain.
I would put it in here like this. But the other thing is all of that same module is shifted in phase, and phase just means left and right. And when I do this and I line them up, I create voxels.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I do this larger one on, oh, hold up, I just fucked this whole thing up. I'm still selecting this other shit. It can see there's already a larger one here.
Yeah, it already maps it.
There's already this larger one here.
Oh my god.
And those are different modules.
Right.
And then the orientation starts to
get fucky.
But even this orientation, right, doesn't really, it still fucking maps to each one of these points.
Right. Fuck. That's so insane, dude.
That's geometric unity right there.
That's the only word that can come to mind, or only phrase, dude. Brett's onto something.
Provides ambiguous information about position. Active firing of this neuron can either mean that the animal is here, here, or basically anywhere on the vertices of the grid. However, if we are also receiving the signals from cells of a different module, we can superimpose the firing fields and pinpoint the exact location.
Like
Supposedly,
what I was
this
just
mechanism
doing.
is used further down the line in the hippocampus to translate
So-
the activity of grid cells.
What he's saying here is that grid cells inform place cells, right? And we started this whole thing off with what is reality, and essentially Kant comes to the conclusion. Well, Descartes puts you in a box, right, where everything outside of you could not be real, right? You have no idea other than your own awareness. But what Kant comes through and says, because Hume and Berkeley and there's another skeptic, I can't remember his name, but they go like so far down that skeptic road, nothing is fucking real. And I mean, unsubscribing to life becomes very easy when you get that nihilistic.
Right.
So Kant, what he basically says is, wait, hold up. There's two things intrinsic to us: is our sense of time and our sense of space. But what he's saying is not what he is not saying is that we have direct access to reality. We have the representations of reality, and this is the metric in which our brain is decoding reality. This is what it is across the board for fucking all of us. And Carl Jung calls it the collective unconscious as well. So here we have a group theory, a social theory between all of us that we can operate from.
Into place cell activity to encode the exact location within the environment. But let's return back to the paper. What's so interesting about grid cells is the collective behavior of all of the cells in the same module. To characterize the activity of the entire network, we can use the data of unit activity, and that is the exact timestamps when each neuron spikes. Smoothing the data allows us to get instantaneous firing rates. For n neurons, that would be n numbers, corresponding to a point in n-dimensional space. Acquiring a large sample of such points, and then applying dimensionality reduction algorithms, which basically find the optimal way to project this high-dimensional point cloud to our conventional three-dimensional space, would give us this.
Fuck.
There is a torus hidden in the activity of grid cell network. As the animal moves in the environment, tracing some path, it nicely maps to a smooth, continuous trajectory of population activity along this torus. If you look at the firing pattern of a single individual grid cell, which, remember, on the plane, the firing fields were arranged in a regular periodic hexagonal grid, it would be localized on a single patch of this torus. Consequently, a different grid cell from the same module corresponds to a different patch. Information one module gives, basically one grid coordinate, is the position along the torus. This means that the brain uses these toroidal coordinates to map the position in space. It's fascinating because in the outside world, there are hardly any tori. We mostly deal with straight lines, planes, and sometimes circles. So why would evolution choose a torus for this purpose? I mean, I can see the rationale for the case of police officers, but all the rest?
That was a donut joke if you didn't get it.
I didn't, and I'm glad you clarified. Thank you.
Even more fascinating is that this torus is invariant to exact environment and even the brain state. Taking an individual grid cell and looking at its activity in
All right, let's go back a little bit because there's
Sure.
a picture he does back here in the beginning that's going to make this make way more sense.
in a bit more detail and provide background information. In this video, we will see how your brain uses
So this is the torus that he's talking about. This is how those cells are representing reality, was that.
Which makes sense, though. Like, that completely registers correctly with me. Like, it's a compass. It's a
So
fucking compass.
when he's talking here about this shape that all of these firings do, so once you take this initial thing up here, you compute it to this, then you compute it to this, then you compute it, you plot it on this Cartesian coordinate system. These firing points create this toroidal structure. So this is the carrier wave, and then everything else happens within it.
But what's wild about that, like, obviously this is being built off of all the cells that we've referred to, correct? This is head cell, grid cell, place cell.
This is just the grid cells. This is
Motherfucker.
only grid cells.
Gosh dang it, dude. Because I was the torus made perfect sense for head cell direction. It made perfect sense because you have windage, you have elevation, you have everything.
Well, the grid
Obviously
cells,
there's a gridding.
the grid cells are being informed by the head direction cells
Place
as
and
well. No, the head direction cells as well as the Flintstone car, where like the speed of your body. So it's the grid cells are the metric, right? Everything is, for lack of a better term, like one body length. It's one
Okay.
step. It's one
Okay.
30-inch step. You see what I'm saying? So that's how your brain is registering what the fuck this grid cell map is, and that's where all of these different scales are. Is this one's two 30-inch steps, or and it's arbitrary what I'm saying, because it's
Yeah, but
obviously
you're
going to be
making
different.
sense.
It's obviously going to be different depending on your height or your speed individually. But that's the
Sure.
way the grid cells are being informed. So this map on these firings, and then you decompose it into this, is only grid cells.
And to clarify further, this one torus being referenced here is one plane of existence, that first 30-inch step. And that two 30-inch step would be computed as a different torus?
No,
No,
everything
these are
exists
all.
inside of this torus.
This is the totality of the circumstance.
itself through a physical space.
This is the grid cells. This
Understood.
map.
Okay.
This
And
is
this creates all those steps.
this is, and then
Or the
everything
creation
gets
of.
built on top of it. You are basically trapped inside of this thing.
This totally makes sense though. The shape is very easy to understand as far
And-
as
And then
registration.
place cells begin to rasterize the image.
Mm.
Grid cells, place cells, perception, social cognition,
Okay.
grid cells.
Okay.
So then
So-
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like in other terms, the grid cells are the building blocks,
Yes.
the foundational registry,
Well,
and then
but
the
the building block of the grid cell is those stripe cells that look like EM waves.
right the individual
The
hashings.
Yeah. And then from there, they become the grid cells. And then from there, those grid cells inform our place cells, and our place cells and grid cells, in conjunction with each other and vectory boundary cells, create the three-dimensional representation of this room that I'm existing in.
And then head direction cells are just for the relativity of that space
Yes.
created.
Object to object orientation. Absolutely. Like polar stuff.
And that's exactly right. Okay.
So interesting about grid cells is the collective behavior of all of the cells in the same module. To characterize the activity of the entire network, we can use the data of unit activity, and that is the exact timestamps when each neuron spikes.
So this is when the neuron spikes.
Smoothing the data allows us to get instantaneous firing rates. For n neurons, that would be n numbers.
And these are those steps.
And then
These are the shelves of a library.
from there you can determine the continuous. This is discrete versus continuous.
Yeah.
And then once you get from here, I don't know how they do this math. I don't understand this n-dimensional space stuff.
So it has to be enumeration in the assigning of these things. So in coding, you have these reference enumerators if you're going to draw from numerous locations for reference. That has to be it.
And then it gets plotted.
Right.
And then these plots, when you make them into a 3D model,
Create a torus.
To our conventional three-dimensional space would give us this.
the torus.
Yep, there is a torus hidden in the activity of grid cell
And
network.
then he makes a
As the
cop
animal
joke.
moves in the environment, tracing some path, it nicely maps to a smooth, continuous trajectory of population activity.
So this is a continuous, but this is what it's actually, the trajectory in real world, like beginning end. So this is the this is the difference between distance and displacement. Right? So
Okay.
like distance here, he's gone really far, but he's also displaced really far. Here, he could go all the way around in a circle and his displacement is 0, but the distance is just the same as this.
Right. And what's strange is that, like, for grid cells, for the reference of that, in my head, there would not be some sort of center pitting. It would be a chessboard.
Well, that's kind of the Kantian notion or the Cartesian notion of like the polar. Everything is egocentric. It's all relative to me.
Right.
So the grid
It's all
cell
centered to me.
to
I am
me.
that
Yes.
pit.
So, well, no, you're not the
Oh,
pit in this. You're where the rat was, and then everything
right.
gets modeled after that.
Mm.
along this torus. If you look at the firing pattern of a single individual grid cell, which, remember, on the plane, the firing fields were arranged in a regular periodic hexagonal grid, it would be localized on a single patch of this torus. Consequently, a different grid cell from the same module corresponds to a different patch. Information one module gives, basically one grid coordinate, is the position along the torus. This means that the brain uses these toroidal coordinates to map the position in space. It's fascinating because in the outside world, there are hardly any tori. We mostly deal with straight lines, planes, and sometimes circles. So why would evolution choose a torus for this purpose? I mean, I can see the rationale for the case of police officers, but all the rest.
there's
What's
the
even more
donut
fascinating
joke.
is that this torus is invariant to exact environment and even the brain state. Taking an individual grid cell and looking at its activity in different environments, which by the way looks totally different to our eyes, in fact, corresponds to the same patch of this population activity torus. The network activity is localized on the same torus even when the animal is sleeping. All of this demonstrates that this toroidal structure emerges independently of incoming sensory information. It
Gosh
is intrinsic to the
dang it.
network.
Independently of incoming. Let's hear that again.
This toroidal structure emerges independently of incoming sensory information. It is intrinsic to the network, arising from specific connectivity of neurons and the weight of synapses between them. This concept is
Bro.
known in
What?
It's because of the placement of the fucking neurons and where they're firing, is what he's saying.
Yeah. But that.
It's just like the head direction cells where they are in a band.
Yeah. But that. I'm okay.
They're connected.
Why am I having such a hard time here? I'm like,
so the hardware is physically connected.
yes, and that's where I'm like, I'm losing it because like, I routinely try in our conversations about this to like, okay, you need to kind of get away from the hardware side of the house. I mean, I know that we're mostly speaking about hardware, but the implication is to be furthering that into the software side of the house.
Sure.
But okay, so as far as grid cells go, it's relative to the space, and now we know not to time. It's because if I'm asleep, my time augmentation is way different anyway. But is it relative, like, so is it only relative to the space I'm currently existing in? So, like, me going to bed right behind me, my grid cells of this room are remaining, or is it to the AO that I'm aware of? Like, my
Both.
town and neighboring towns.
Both.
That's fucked. Because, like, oh my gosh, dude. So, where I'm having a disconnect for myself, right, is that, like, each of these neurons, right, and there's millions, if not billions, and probably billions, they're not independent to the location because they are not binary. They're quantum in their own nature. Yeah?
You're going to have to say that again.
So, basically what I'm saying is that one neuron isn't assigned to this room, or the several, probably millions, aren't relative to this space. Those can also be firing for when I'm imagining Walmart right now, or Safeway, or the road. Like, all of those, like, they're quantum in that existence. They're non-binary.
I fucking hate Jordan Peterson, but I'm going to take one of his fucking sayings, and I'm going to do his little hand thing. It's the substrate. The substrate. The grid cells is the substrate that everything is built on top of. It is invariant. It does not change. It is continuous in every fucking direction. Now, granted, you might come into a room and the room becomes misshapen. It's not global. It is still local. You can change the way the room is oriented and you change the shape of the grid. However, it is still to you the same grid. It's not as good.
It's fucking quantum computing. It's non-binary. So it's not that cell is either on to this location, or if I'm not in this room, it's just off. It's continuously being exactly what it's supposed to be, which is mapping.
Yes.
Woof, dude.
And then when we get back to, I fucking closed it now, but this,
I can't see
I know.
yet. Okay.
When we get back to this, once these grid cells start to stack, you are also creating the three-dimensional environment, these voxels. And there's going to be
Hubert land.
the other videos that we're going to talk about. We see, like, look how simple that was. And now I have literal voxels. And we're going to go into like Leonard Susskind and the hologram theory or holographic principle, but that's what this is. This is how this is physics. Like, this is how all of physics understands our reality to exist, is in voxels.
Which is bizarre.
And our brain is doing this through these grid cells. So these grid cells are creating this three-dimensional world that the place cells can then, for lack of a better word, rasterize or interpolate or pixelate, whichever one fits better. But all of the sensory information that we get, and that's the next part of this video, is we start to talk about the more abstract space of what grid cells and place cells actually do.
Science as continuous attractor network, when connectivity restricts underlying dynamics.
So,
when you move to a new city, at first, you have a hard time navigating around even just your neighborhood. Safely getting to a new destination requires constant checking of Google Maps or asking strangers for directions. But
see, this is the place cell video, and we've already seen this, so I'm going to skip past.
I'm curious if this is having an effect on us, though, as like as far as like strengthening your own grid cells, because like so much of all navigation is based on Google Maps now. Like, most people use it just to get around their city that they've lived in their whole life.
Well, this for me, this is like how I operate. I have a mini map in my brain at all times, and it rotates.
Yeah.
But I don't think everybody exists that way.
No. And as just a complete random observation, though, I wonder if the reason for like Minecraft's success with so many people, primarily children, is because it's so relative to the way we process information anyway.
Facts.
And that's fucking bizarre, dude.
The development of children is becoming so much more catered to the development of their body. Right, so like I really want to eventually we'll get here, but there's this philosopher, his name is Pierre Grimes, and he talks about Plato and the Republic and all this shit, but he like goes so in depth in like the actual ideas themselves, it's nutty. But he has this picture that he draws of this seed and a plant that grows all the way through and then dies, and then he has past, present, future, and he asks like, where do things come from? Does it come from the past or does it come from the future? Because at one point it didn't exist, but now it does. And where did it come from? So it comes from the future into the present, and then it goes into the past, right? It's not like you're pulling things from the past. So the time is one directional in nature. It's coming at us. But development goes forward.
Ooh.
Do you see what I'm saying? So
yeah, no, it because like I'm assuming the reference point is saying that the seeds have to drop from the plant.
He's just starting from like the beginning of the development or birth, and birth to death is a time, but it's a different direction than the way that we experience time.
Sure, that makes total sense. It feels like an elaboration on like the chicken and the egg argument, and then like a plant has to drop a seed and then die to fertilize that soil. So as progress is occurring, like obviously, yeah, you're saying that there's that intersection of time coming and progress coming. Whew, dude, hold on.
It's for me what you were just saying about the Minecraft though, and it's about the way that our brains are already existing. So when people are getting so up in arms about what is that new math called?
I know what you're talking about,
or whatever.
Yeah, Common Core.
So there's this idea that Kant was talking about time and space being intrinsic to us. Like, this is the way that we fucking see things. But there's these other philosophers that created these other systems, but they're not intrinsic. You have to learn to see the things this way. It's not born into you. So the idea of what you were saying with Minecraft is like, because our brains operate like this, it's just fucking easier to teach us this way because it goes along with our development.
Sure.
So there's this this is a whole different tangent, but there's this product company called Love Every, and it's fucking great. And you can do like a subscription where they send you toys for your children that are based on the developmental age or period that they are in, which is based on like psychology and the things that they should be learning there in that moment, right? Like circles and square holes, or like the textures of certain things are going to be this way because your children are essentially developing physics models. They're making game engines in their head of what the world is. That's the difference between us and AI. We can develop these models of the world and act on them
instead of the reverse of that.
Yeah. So
How
now
interesting.
we're going to talk, it's going to go into place cells again.
Provides direct evidence of the causal role of hippocampal place cell neurons in constructing the cognitive maps. Now, the question that arises, how does this association between nerve cells in the hippocampus and their preferred patches on the ground take place? It turns out that the layout of place cells is not constant. If you look at the activity of a given neuron, it would have one place field in this environment, different place field in a different environment, and maybe show no activity at all in the third.
And this is place cells, not grid cells.
Right. Okay.
Such
Because I was
changes in firing
about to
activity
panic.
constitute a remapping of place cell representation of space. It can take a variety of different forms, and the degree of remapping depends on the similarity between two environments. For example, if you repaint the walls and move furniture around, the majority of place fields would change. However, if you hang just a little picture on the wall, only a small fraction of place fields would shift, with the rest remaining mostly intact. Unfortunately, we are still lacking any meaningful way to describe what goes where and according to which rules when remapping takes place.
And this is where the science of object, like what that Numina place was talking about, where you have objects and the reference frame of this object is here versus this object is here. That's where that theory, the last video that we were talking about, the computations of all these things, that's what they're trying to explain. But even that is still not proven. But it was just a very good way of showing that information.
Sometimes, though, the transformation of place fields clearly relates to the transformation of the environment. For example, in the case when a mouse was in a cylindrical chamber with a cue card at a certain position, rotating the card caused the place fields to rotate accordingly, but maintain their relative locations. Even more interesting example was observed by O'Keefe himself, when place fields stretched along with the box when he varied the aspect ratio of the walls. Hippocampal remapping still remains largely a mysterious phenomenon, but we can at least hypothesize what useful role it might play. What remapping tells us is that different environments have different internal maps, and so the pattern of place cell activity provides information not only about animals' position within the environment, but also about the identity of the environment itself. So, what aspects of the environment should be altered for remapping to occur? What is enough for the hippocampus to classify two surroundings as different? Interestingly, even the change in non-spatial features can cause a portion of place cells to remap. For example, changing the order in the room, or fear conditioning. If you apply mild electric shock while the mouse is running around in a familiar cage so that it develops the fear of this environment, that causes place cells to remap.
Now we have to remember that the place cells are literally constructing these environments in 3 dimensions in our brain. So what this is saying is that PTSD remaps the way that you see the fucking world.
Well, these types of tests have been done with fear conditioning studies, but I haven't seen them go this far as like neurological firings tied to them. And that makes total sense, because if they were to turn off that electrical shock but put that rat back in that same box, it would still map to that same way that it was taught to. That is brutal, dude.
Even though nothing about the chamber itself has changed. So the internal map of a familiar restaurant you have been going in for years is drastically altered once you have a heart-shattering breakup at one of the tables. We can see how there is this additional layer of information about the context, not just the physical space. And remapping ties this information about physical location in space together with particular events and contexts meaningfully relating to that space. And it raises the question whether place cell is a great term after all. Now we are getting to the limits of this terminology. Yes, initially it was discovered that certain pyramidal neurons in the hippocampus show location specificity, and we still refer to them as place cells in studies on spatial navigation. But as it turns out, they can directly represent non-spatial information as well.
And that's what we're about to talk about right fucking
Let's see
now.
if you can solve
Yeah.
This fucks me up. Right. So now, just so we're fucking on the same page, we have a internal representation of the world, of this room, and when I look over here, I can imagine the bathroom, or I can imagine three-dimensionally. I can take, because I'm in a hotel right now, I can see the fucking hotel from outside of myself and move it, or take. Where's some place that, you know what I'm saying, like everybody's been. Like, think about your house that you're living in right now. Imagine seeing it from the top down, and then rotate it, and then take the roof off. And you can imagine every room relative to every other room. But the fucked up thing is that you also simulate the social aspects of that as well. You simulate where people are relative to you, and there's physical proof of that.
of the following riddle. Bob is married to Alice, who is George's daughter. Let's see if you can solve the following riddle. Bob is married to Alice, who is George's daughter. Alex is George's son. How is Alex related to Bob? You may have successfully identified that Alex is Bob's brother-in-law. But can you tell me exactly how you did it? Well, I think you'll agree that it's really tough to explain the concrete logic behind the solution. You just sort of mentally walked along this tree of relations, from Bob to Alex, and then returned back to Bob, using the shortest path, which you identified as being the brother-in-law. Now when I put it this way, perhaps you won't be surprised that to solve this riddle, you engaged exactly the same brain structure, which you use to construct the shortest route from your house to the nearby shop. What I've just described is a problem with a really high level of abstraction, which is unique to primates. But a variety of other social animals, such as mice and bats, also have evolved a sophisticated brain circuitry dedicated to social interactions. And the circuitry I'm referring to is the hippocampus, a brain structure which we have talked quite a number of times on this channel. In this video, we will see how the hippocampus represents other individuals and relationships, ultimately building a social map. If you're interested, stay tuned.
I want to see him do it on ants.
Before we begin, I'd like to mention that I now have a Patreon account. So if you'd like to support the channel, I would really appreciate it. In the future, it will include additional evolved was to carry out efficient computation. The hippocampus, when it first evolved, was to carry out efficient computations in the environment. For example, to memorize the location of a nest, or build efficient routes to food sources. In other words, it operated in a purely physical space. But over the course of mammalian evolution, the hippocampus got repurposed to operate with other, more abstract variables, not just physical space. And one of such new jobs of the hippocampus is really prominent in social animals. To them, other conspecific individuals is an important aspect of outside world.
Conspecific means of the same species.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to embed information about them into the existing
I had
map
to
of
Google
physical
that
space. Let's call this stage social information in physical space. Finally, if we increase the level of abstraction even further, which is the case for humans, we can expect a complete detachment of social information from the physical environment. After all, we can navigate the network of our friends while sitting still on the couch with no one around. This is navigation in a purely social space. In this video, we are going to gradually increase the level of abstraction and look at examples from recently published papers, how hippocampus is involved in representing social information at each stage, beginning with purely physical space. This is the most ancient type of computation, which has really sparked the decades of hippocampal research in the first place. I have a dedicated video on the spatial processing in the hippocampus. If you have already watched it, or if you are familiar with the concept of place cells and you don't need a reminder, feel free to skip this part. For all the rest, let's make a brief overview of why hippocampus has earned all the hype.
He does
The
a
most
really good
important
job
idea
here.
is that inside the hippocampus, there are these special pyramidal neurons which are selective to physical location. These neurons, which were termed place cells, are activated whenever the animal is in a specific location in the environment, referred to as the place field of that cell. Place cells can tile the entire environment, forming a neural substrate to perform spatial computations, such as memorizing paths and calculating efficient routes. This internal representation of the environment tiled with place fields is called a cognitive map. However, it may seem unclear how this purely spatial representation could be adapted to represent other kinds of information. I mean, what would place fields even look like when there is no physical ground? Let's go one step further on our ladder of abstraction and see what happens to the cognitive map when we add other conspecific individuals, that is, the animals of the same species, to the environment. Can we expect the internal model of the world to expand in order to somehow include other individuals? Well, in a variety of social animals, such as mice, bats, and primates, that is indeed the case. Let's see what happens inside the brains of observer bats when they perform this task. Given what we have already seen for the mapping of physical space, how do you think? What will the activity of hippocampal neurons in the observer bat look like? Well, there is always a zero hypothesis that adding new bat would make no difference. But I wouldn't be making this video if that were the case, would I? Indeed, they discovered neurons which are selectively tuned to the position of the demonstrator bat and termed them as social play cells. So the hippocampus has the capacity to track the location of another individual in the same way as it maps the position of self. A more interesting question, at least to me, is what is the nature of these social play cells? What is their relationship with purely spatial play cells, which are also there?
I gotta talk now. Bro, this is what happens when you're a team leader or when you're doing any type of close quarters combat, when you're in a room clearing situation, and I'm entering the building. I know where the dude behind me is and where he is going, and I'm using my mental map, and I am projecting him in these locations. And I'm also projecting the line of sight that he has or does not have relative to the space that we are in.
Yeah.
And on top of that, because if I can do this for my homies, I can also do this for potential enemies. So
yes.
I am projecting the idea of an enemy behind this corner as I'm entering and clearing. And I am confirming or denying the presence of said enemy as I fucking hook into the room and I clear my corner. That fucking, what do they call him? Wraith disappears in my brain. Like, just poof, he gone. But he was there at one point, and I operated as if he was real.
Dude. Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, because it is relative to projection. What's crazy, though, is like in this study that they're showing is that there's a projection trail as well. Like, if I'm second man, and I squeeze you into the room, and I see that you don't button hook, I expected you to button hook. My projection instantly goes to trail, and then I take the next path. And, dude, how interesting. Does it go further in the video to say, like...
I'll play it again, but I just wanted to talk about the fact that this is the shit that I talked about, because I cussed out privates so many times. I'm like, bro, can you even see in 3 dimensions? When I'm playing fucking video games, especially battle royales, and I have me here, there's a fucking mini-map so you can see what I can see, and you can see where I am. Why the fuck don't you know where I'm at?
Right.
What are you doing? Why are you looking over there? The enemy is in the front of us. You should be looking towards the enemy, front towards enemy. You know what I mean? Or if I'm handling the front, look to the back. Look behind us.
Yeah. Find work. Find work, fucker. Like.
So the problem that I feel a lot of people have, and that veterans that we do too much of, because we've been habituated in this survival algorithm, is that I am always in my simulation I am using so much of my RAM memory to represent all of the individuals around me and represent what it is that they're doing. I'm running a simulation in my head at all times of like what is happening all around me. But the interesting thing is that now we know for a fact that this happens locally, what we can see visually. There was those 3 levels of leadership, right? But I also think that's the 3 levels of cognition. There's direct, organizational, and strategic. So the 1-to-1 ratio shit, like the things that I've experienced directly to me in my life, is the way that I project these far things in my reality to be, like this 3rd level of abstraction, social spaces. So if everybody in my fucking childhood was out to get me, or conversely, if I'm always out for myself, I think that everybody is like that. And then that's where you start to have this idea of they're all trying to kill us. They just want to kill us. The population control. It's like, bro, chill. I used to be one of them. I used to be one of those people.
representing
am
the route
sometimes.
when the observer bat
Yeah,
itself
it
starts to
depends.
fly. And what happens to the activity of social play cells when there is no other bat? But before I give you the answer, let's try to think about possible scenarios. The first hypothesis is that these two subsets of neurons, spatial and social play cells, are completely distinct. Each is active in only one of the scenarios. So
No.
a conventional spatial play cell represents the position of self when the bat is flying, and stays completely silent when it hangs still, observing the demonstrator. A social play cell, on the other hand, reliably represents the position of a demonstrator bat and doesn't activate during the flight of the self. This division of labor makes sense, but perhaps can seem a bit redundant. After all, each neuron does nothing 50% of the time. Another possibility is that a pyramidal neuron can switch its roles, functioning as a social play cell during the period of observation, but mapping the position of self during the flight. In other words, it has a place field in both
I
spaces,
agree with that.
the location of self and location of a demonstrator, depending on the current task. If this is indeed true, what are the possible relative positions of these two place fields? Are they similar or dissimilar? For example, let's say that during the observation, a neuron spikes whenever the demonstrator bat is in the middle of the path leading to the ball A. When the observer bat, the one we're recording from, takes off, where can we expect this self-place field to be? At the beginning, middle, or end of the path A?
It's got to be at the beginning.
And what if the bat
I
makes a
think.
mistake and flies to the ball B instead? Can we expect this neuron to activate somewhere on the path B
I think it has to
during
be
the
in the
flight?
middle.
Late.
Now, I know I'm throwing a lot of questions at you instead of giving concrete answers. The thing is, when carrying out an experiment, this is exactly the type of situation you face as a researcher. Okay, by now you probably had enough time to make your predictions, so let's get back to the paper. It's very
Middle.
common in science when you are choosing between
Going
two
front.
extreme hypotheses. The truth turns out to be somewhere in the middle. And this is also true for this case. There are play cells that are either purely spatial or purely social. But there are also some neurons which exhibit this type of switching, and whose
course.
activity depends on the task. And these neurons show a whole continuum from congruent cells, when the spatial and social place fields are very similar, to non-congruent cells, when they are dissimilar. This indicates that information about physical contents of outside world and the social aspect is encoded in neurons in a conjoined manner, with one cell often having different specializations depending on the context. Interestingly, if you do a similar task, but when the bat has to follow an inanimate object, you'll see that at the level of single neurons, other bats are represented differently from inanimate moving objects. It means that the hippocampus doesn't merely treat the other bat as the object to follow. The fact that it is a conspecific individual affects its representation inside the mental model of the environment. It points in the direction that other aspects, such as the context of social interactions and potential mating, are explicitly interwoven into the map of external worlds, along with physical features, such as locations of rewards and obstacles. But what if we remove the space completely? To do this, we are going to increase the level of abstraction one step further, to the point which is only humans and other higher primates are capable of. In our daily life, we often use metaphors like he is close to me or she is above him in this social context. Could it be that it's more than just a figure of speech? Perhaps the social space inherits the neural substrate from its more ancient physical counterpart. To investigate how the brain tracks social interactions in humans, a group of researchers, led by Daniela Schiller, developed a choose-your-own-adventure game, in which subjects had to interact with fictional characters to find a new home and a job. Activity of their hippocampus was monitored through fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging. Essentially, characters in this game form a two-dimensional social space, with the two main axes being the power, or the degree of dominance and authority, and affiliation, or the measure of intimacy and trustworthiness. For example, your boss would probably be located in the upper left corner with high power and low affection, while your grandma would probably be in the lower right. These are the two psychological dimensions, which form the notion of social distance between different people, from your point of view. Notice that it is an egocentric or subjective representation. Your boss would probably have much higher values of affection in the coordinate system of his wife than in yours. The game contains 6 characters, and as the storyline unfolds, participants interact with one character at a time by choosing between 2 responses. Each response either increases the power of affiliation by 1 or decreases the metric by 1. For example, if the boss asks you to stay later, you can either agree, which would give him +1 power in your social map, or you can demand or other additional payments, which would decrease his authority by 1. This way, with every interaction, the position of each character in your two-dimensional map changes in discrete steps along one of the axes.
He almost
And we can
made a
trace the
swastika.
evolution of the character as their trajectory in the social
close.
space. Notice that since this is a two-dimensional plane, we can describe the position either using Cartesian coordinates, x and y, or polar coordinates by measuring the vector angle and its length. I won't go too deep into the rationale for switching to polar coordinates, but basically it has to do with the fact that power and affiliation in psychology are not really independent and orthogonal as x and y would be. You can consult the paper for more details if you're interested. Anyway, in these polar coordinates, the vector angle measures the power modulated by affiliation, and its length is proportional to the absolute social distance between the two people. In this study, it was found that changes in the hippocampal activity of subjects correlated with the vector angle. And the strength of this correlation, how much the hippocampal activity predicts the movement in the social space, is higher in individuals with better social skills. These results suggest that the hippocampus may be crucial for social cognition and provide the necessary machinery to encode the social aspect of episodic memories. It also points in the direction that the hippocampal circuitry for spatial processing is utilized by humans to construct a social space and map out the position of individuals and distances between them. Alright, let's recap. In this video, we have seen how the hippocampus might have evolved to represent social interactions at different levels of abstraction. So the take-home message is that despite how counterintuitive it might seem, we probably use the same mental machinery to navigate in social landscapes as we do for physical ones. And who knows what other functions this mysterious loopy structure might have that we just don't know about. The only way to find out is to keep looking while staying open to new ideas. Which brings me to the sponsor of today's video.
This totally makes sense. Especially when it's referenced as such a subjective nature to yourself.
Leave the activity.
Yeah. Let me see how to do that. Leave. Like if you have a superiority complex, or on the reverse side of that, how everything becomes relative to that space. That, well, they might have a power and authority, but they're not above me. Or when you subscribe to the game of the army, like, well, that guy has more chevrons, that dude has more rockers, he's up here on the power structure. Like, you know, you're automatically giving into the game. Fuck.
For me, this just one of the first videos that we were talking about, it shows projections.
Yeah.
Like in this mental space, like I am projecting my consciousness forward into where I want to go. Then this video proves that not only do we do that, we also do that relative to people who we give a fuck about. And you can give a fuck about somebody in a multitude of ways, but the binary of that is because I'm afraid or because I care. You're either my enemy or you are my friend. I'm here to protect you and be there for you all the time, so I give a fuck, or I'm worried about what it is that you're capable of doing to me.
Yeah.
And at the end of the video, I just realized that when it's talking about that social, right, the social abstraction, I'm not very good at that. I'm not good at social understanding where people are relative to me, only in a very linear sense. I understand he outranks me, I outrank him, I know more than him, but he knows more than me. I understand that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like my wife, it's a fucking ball of yarn, bro. It's not, there's no straight lines anywhere. And
Interesting.
the old me always used to want to tell her that that was wrong and that you need to give a fuck, like on survival mode shit. But the longer I've been through therapy, the more I'm realizing that I was habituated poorly. Right? Trauma doesn't make you a better person, because then you go and help kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
hurting a child on purpose is actually helping them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm unwilling to say shit like that.
Yeah, 100%. What's also interesting about this is, like, so there's certain coworkers that I have that I do not like, or I view them as subpar to me as far as a binary system. So I do not fear them and I do not respect them. However, right? So if it was just him and I do not have anything to do with you. You're not my friend. Don't count you as anything. But if we were in a situation where an external threat presented itself, all of a sudden we're on the same team. And it shows that verticality of that graph is not finite.
Mhm.
Because I don't see them moving up on a social hierarchy. I just see that person falling below them in the
Relative to
necessity.
you. Yeah, relative to you, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because there's been several situations that have been like a little hairy, and I've been with someone that like I'll make jokes about, like especially when I was in protection. I used to make these jokes like if anything happens, I'm shooting them first. Like if any critical incident presents itself, I'm gonna turn to that fucking passenger seat or driver seat and end them, and then deal with whatever's external. Obviously a joke, but it kind of goes to show that there is a physicality to that mental space of like, yeah, no, I do not like them. However, there's no finite to the end of this graph as far as an external, non-known, or rather known threat to my life. All of a sudden, they are now an ally by necessity.
Mhm.
They get pulled into that center vertex.
So this place cell map, this toroidal structure that it's talking about,
Mhm.
is exactly what we do in both of our jobs, in like the military side and the LE side. Like when you're doing a raid on a compound, I have this mental structure. And when I'm entering, let's say I go and kick open the door, right? I've never been at this house before. I have no prior knowledge of anything. All I see is when I walk up to it, it's a double wide trailer, right?
Mhm.
I can predict certain things. I can know things about this place before I even kick open the fucking door. Only based on the dimensions of it. It's not like
Right.
I'm gonna kick open the door and it's fucking Narnia and I'm in the woods of fucking,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, Serbia or
Right.
some shit. It's it's only gonna be fucking 10 feet deep, and it's gonna be 50 feet to the left, depending on where the door is, if it's center fed or corner fed, right? I
Mhm.
know things before I even get in there, and I'm
Right.
projecting things into there before I even open that fucking door. So for us, like this survival algorithm, the threats are in those corners, and once you clear the threats, the next threat becomes priority, and so on and so forth. The problem I have is that once I got out of that world and I stopped being habituated in that was me all the time, every door was a fucking threat, everything was a threat, this, that, and the other. I come home and everywhere I look, there's an enemy, a potential enemy. All the
Mhm.
trash on the fucking freeway, oh shit, there's an IED.
Yeah.
Everything.
Cars parked on the side of the road with the doors open. That's an ambush.
Then after a few years or a year or so of not deploying and like being home and realizing, all right, I'm not going to die here. But some people don't even get to that point. Some people still think there's terrorist cells that live around the corner from them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which potentially is true, but why are they coming for you? You're not that cool, bro. But um, the point is that for me, those enemies started going further in the background. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
further in.
Well, now the pattern is that there's not a demon behind that door. There's not a dude with a RPK in the corner.
No, but the dude with the demon behind the door is controlling America.
Yeah.
The demon behind the door is controlling the entire world. Do you see what I'm
Mhm.
saying? That's what I mean
Yeah.
by it gets further and further out. And
Yeah, now
this,
evil isn't direct, it's indirect.
yes, and it's
Yeah.
around me at all times.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to protect everybody. And every little thing leads to your my son does something small, and I'm like, well, because you did this, this leads to this, and then this leads to this, and if you
Mhm.
don't fucking fix this now, this is what's gonna happen later. Bro, he's 5, he's 6, he's 7, he's 8.
Right.
Chill the fuck
Right.
out. Chill the fuck
Relax.
out. You're there to keep those other things from happening later on down the line, and you have to. The thing that I had to realize was like their representation of time is completely different than mine.
Mm.
I've had 33 years to experience time.
Yeah.
I have a different understanding of what time actually is. So when
Sure.
you ask him to do something a month from now, he barely knows what a month is.
Yeah.
That's forever. Do you remember when
Yeah.
you were young and Christmas would happen, and then like come February, Valentine's Day, you're like, God damn, Christmas is so far away.
Yeah.
Christmas is so far.
Yeah.
But it's just a
Yeah.
year. And then now that I'm older, it keeps coming faster and faster and
Hmm.
faster.
Right. Well, now time is so familiar that it's conditioned, that it's like so much less attention is paid to its passing.
Mm.
But to divert you for a moment, and it's based off of what you said, like I can understand a house before you look at it.
Mm.
Have you had an experience where you're like, oh yeah, I understand what the house looks like you saw the pipes coming out of certain rooms, you're like bathrooms, kitchens, like I got it figured out.
Mm.
And then you boot that door and it's completely fucked because it's some sort of tweaker house or whatever the fuck, and they've put up false walls and curtains over shit and everything's fucked. Like I'm sure you've experienced that to some degree, and there's a physical feeling inside of your head that it literally feels like misfires.
Mm.
Like what you're saying is not what it's supposed to be, and your brain's like, no, 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 like, and it has to like instantly try to remap what's happening.
Yep.
And I'm really curious to see that represented on a cell map now. Is like it has to be like the immediately, like those reversing's of a room. Like yes, there's a cue card. You still understand where the absolute walls are, but there's still like this fucky, like, well, what I assumed was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house is now a 21-bedroom house because they fucking false walled all of it. These are weirdos. There's like plywood and curtains and shit. now what I've thought was a center fed room is actually a fucking hallway into like 3 more rooms or cubbies, and it's like your brain has to fucking try to eat that shit out.
So there's this other person that calls that the orienting principle, or like yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what she called it. It's also like when you're lost and then all of a sudden you figure out where you are. It's like the whole fucking world rotates.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then I've had this experience. I've talked about it on like one of my first podcasts where, so there's this horizon, right, that exists within both your visual spectrum and your auditory spectrum. And because of all of the gunfire and the explosions that I've been exposed to, my auditory one is a little bit more diffuse throughout. You know what I'm saying? It's not as clear cut as it used to be. So I was working at this bar, and I know this dude didn't like me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then this one night, I was like on some super paranoid schizophrenic shit. And I just, every time I turned my back, I would hear him talking shit to me. Like behind my back, like you're a fucking, and I'm working a bar, there's loud music and shit. And I'm like, fuck, dude, I can't actually hear it. Am I hearing just enough and then I'm projecting the words onto him? Is that what's happening right now? I'm not really fucking sure, bro. I don't know. And then I'm in the bathroom, like restocking some shit or cleaning some shit or doing something. And then he opens the door, he asked me a question, and I was like, nah, da 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 da. And I like turned around, and then he was like, do you want to get fucking smacked in here? And I fucking heard it plain as day. And I turn around and the door's already closed. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it was literally what you're talking about, like this. It felt like my brain was rubbing against itself, like the two hemispheres. And I was literally about to have a panic attack because, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to kill him, and at the same time, I wanted to understand that I would be okay. Like, am I fucking hallucinating right now? Is all of this happening? That is
what is this?
That was the most gaslit I've ever been in my life. Right? And then my wife helped me come to this conclusion, and she was like, well, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, does it matter? Like, does it matter? Like, does his opinion matter? Does any of what you're talking about actually matter? Did it happen? It's like, she's like, what would happen if it happened? I was like, I'd fucking kill this kid. If he put his fucking hands on me, bro, I would have beat the dog shit out of him. And at the end of the day, I was just like, you know what? You're right. You're right. I just let it go. Just let this go. This is all in my... This has the potential to all be in my fucking head. And then I just took all of this shit out on somebody. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was possible in this moment. And I see that shit all the time. Especially with men. Or just especially when people are having a bad day. I'm going to make you feel the pain that I feel. But then it
Right.
goes into like emotional regulation, which goes back into this developmental phases of childhood where most of us in our generation grew up never being apologized to,
Yeah.
right? Your dad and your mom were wrong a lot, and they never apologized to us. Never. It was never their fault. It was always shut the
Well, if
fuck
you
up.
hadn't done this,
Yeah, or I'm the parent, you're the
yeah,
child, shut the fuck up.
I wouldn't have to hit you if you didn't do that.
And we are also the generation that is now having to give our children things that were never given to us. You I just the gravity of that, it's in and of itself is fucking crazy to me. Something that
It's
I was
huge.
never given, I'm giving to my child because I know that this is what right looks like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is that development and that growth, and we would have never got here if it wasn't for certain.
Therapists.
True, true. But I was going way more generalized than that, and I was
Sure.
going to say something along the lines of civilization building blocks had to
Yeah.
be met. Like, first, the biggest, strongest dude in the tribe isn't in charge anymore,
Yeah.
right? Might is right is gone. That's the first thing that had to leave. So
Yep.
then all of us collectively are like, hey, what's up? This is what we want to do. All right, bet. So the group has to agree with whatever the fuck it is. And there's
Hmm.
times, and I hate to say this, but there's times where the group doesn't know what's best for itself.
Amen.
You know what
That's
I mean?
why our government structure is the way it is right now.
Yes.
There's a recognition that democracy is anarchy.
So we come to a point in society where when you get away from might is right and you start to have this group collective caring about itself and order, right? You can develop things that are above the survival algorithm, things that are esteem needs, like belonging, or
Mm.
on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those things that are above sex, food, water, shelter, and safety. Because once you have all of those things and those things are being met, there's a lot of behaviors that are no longer serve you. Like, it doesn't do me any good to go next door and beat the shit out of my neighbor and steal his food.
No.
Right? That's not. I'm just gonna end up in prison, and then there's my life. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that when you come back from a deployment, or when you're stuck in this modality of thought, or this PTSD complex, or this disorder specifically, where we begin to see the world as the enemy, right? Descartes puts us in this bubble inside of our own head, but PTSD makes the bubble the devil. Everything that is I'm projecting onto everything is just evil. And that's the only reason that you did this, right? I used to say this shit all the time to my wife, like, you did that because of this, and because of this means this. And she's like, what? No, none of that is how I think. I'm like, no, I know how you think. I know how everybody thinks.
Yeah.
I know what you're thinking, right?
Hmm.
But that, in a combat context, I do.
Yes.
And like statistically, this is what you would be doing. And if you do something outside of this, number one, it was probably worse of an option for you. You know what I mean? Like, if you had
Yeah.
just taken the high ground right now, you would have me. So I
Yeah.
planned for that. But since you're down here, I'm already 2 steps ahead of you, and I'm
Easy
winning.
pickings,
Yeah,
bitch.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm winning now.
Yeah.
So there is a context in which you can read people's mind, but it's not in 1080p. It may be
No.
in 144, maybe some 240 at times.
Hmm.
Like, I can definitely get the thumbnail, right?
Right. Well, and it feels like so the more you do things in a tactical environment, the more you understand battle rhythm. And that there's a sequence of the dance steps in that chess game.
Mm.
And I know that if I'm zigging, their likely action is to zag. I know that if I'm not moving, they probably are.
And
So I need to get back up.
if they're not, it tells me
Yes.
something about what type of training they have, how good
Yes.
they are. Yeah.
Yes. So I know that if I'm not achieving some sort of higher fire superiority or robbing them of the initiative and putting that battle space back in my hands, then they're going to use that against me. The problem is that you start to apply that to your personal life and be like, I need to deprive them of initiative. I need to win the fight.
I need
And it's like, that's fucking wild.
I need to win the fight before there's a
Yeah.
fight. I need
It's
to
like,
start
yeah.
the fight. I need to end
Yes.
the fight. I need to end
Yes,
it.
this is mine now. I'm taking this shit. No, I don't want to hear your fucking response. Don't justify your actions. No, no, this is what I felt. This is what I knew you were doing this shit.
Yep.
And it's like, dude, it's just so not. The one thing though is that I recently got the response of, but that's what I heard, and I'm still trying to like process that because it's like what I said was this. And you're telling me what you heard is this. Ergo, you are assigning the emotion to my own words and then taking it as fact. And that one's hard. Because they're not fucking wrong.
What is it? AI uses linguistic models to model the world, and we use linguistics to describe our models of the world, right? So this is that concept of the echo, right? So when you say something, I hear something, and it may not even be what you fucking said,
Yeah.
right? And it's not necessarily that I didn't hear the words that you used in the order that you used them. It's the meaning that I am attributing to those words based on all of my experiences in life. This means this. And that's what I was talking about with my wife when I would be like, she said, like, I was like, I got super into writing and I thought I wrote this fucking super sweet thing. And I like showed it to her and she read it and she got up and she was like, it was good. I was like, you fucking hated it. And I was pissed, bro. I was fucking pissed. Because a therapist, my most recent therapist told me that a relationship is all about expectation management. And that is the exact same thing that we're talking about with this PTSD and this cognitive map where I'm projecting enemies. I'm expecting an enemy everywhere. And if I expect enemies everywhere, I'm going to fucking find them.
Yes.
So then I take that same modality, right? That one dude said some shit in one of our last videos about, I think it was Tolman, when he said there's different types of learning, and those different types of learning are better in different contexts. It's all the same brain, but there's different modes in which you solve different problems, right? Like you don't do an attack by fire in a raid.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if the goal is to enter and clear and capture the HVT, you don't hit it with a JDAM.
Yeah.
Right? Because it doesn't meet your intent. So there's like this way of being doesn't work over here. So this other way of being is really uncomfortable for a lot of us because number one, we've never done it with our parents, right?
Yeah.
Pause. Our parents never taught us how to do this thing called emotional regulation.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
No.
So that is our issue, or my issue specifically, or it has been my issue for a very long time. And I heard this very interesting quote the other day, and it's that somehow men have managed to brand themselves as unemotional when the only emotion that we ever feel is anger. We are the most emotional people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that was me forever. And then I also didn't know what my anger was. I didn't know why I was angry. You pissed me the fuck off. If you hadn't have said that shit, we wouldn't be here right now. If you hadn't have called me this or that or the other thing, I wouldn't be fucking you up. You know what I'm saying? And then somebody along the line told me that I was allowing other men to affect me emotionally. So how strong am I really? And then where's my free will there? I'm allowing other people to control my actions. And I was like, hold up. Hold the
Uh-oh.
fuck up. I was like,
Uh-oh.
oh, you're right. You're right. Because I'm being mad predictable. Because all it takes is somebody to walk up to me and call me a pussy, and he already knows my next fucking 6 steps. You know what I mean?
You know, and I've recently been talking about that over the last couple months, I feel like my emotional spectrum has dwindled again to a point prior to me going to my last therapy sessions, and I feel like I'm pegged at the 45 between sad and anger. And it fucking sucks because I feel like I've lost my regulation ability of that. And I think it just pays homage to the standardization of like, men aren't emotional and men are violent. We're capable of violence. All the Jordan Peterson shit. You're a monster. Be one, but don't be one. Only be one when you have to be one, kind of shit. But what that bleeds into, I feel like, is this rejection of things that like you could take advantage of. I take it as it removes me from the present. Because what I'm doing is I'm fixating on all this other shit. And so at any drop of the hat that spawns any sort of fucking tick in that needle, I end up choosing a route between, well, now I gotta hit something, and, well, I think I need to be alone for the next few hours.
It's definitely a long journey, and there's something to be said. There's something to be said for like the journey. It's about the journey and not the destination, because there's things that you're gonna learn along the road that are gonna help you in that destination, and you can't just like teleport to the end and be like, oh, I understand everything.
No.
Because then,
I'm happy now.
What's the fun? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as far as being pegged out, like between sad and angry, it means that you're repressing something. That's number one. And number two, it also, well, number one, it means you're repressing something. And repressing something means you are not admitting something to yourself because of the way that it's going to make you feel. And you're not admitting it to yourself because you don't want to feel it. And the reason you don't want to feel it, whether or not it's true, is because the pain it will actually give you. And then feeling that pain, I would always almost assume makes you feel weak, instead of the way I kind of look at this thing now is like it makes me feel. We kind of talked about it the other day about those 50-meter targets, and there's always more. It's like, oh shit, I found another pocket to dig up. Let's clean this up. Let's clean this up now before I build my house on this thing and it fucking crumbles through the floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've hit rock bottom more times than I can count. But I just had I just had one of those moments the other day about like that boogaloo thing, and like what actually the apocalypse would look like. And then this movie or this TV show, The Last of Us, like the dude's daughter dies in his arms at the beginning of the apocalypse. And in my head I was like, if my kids die, my wife die, and I'm the only one alive, there's no hope for anyone. I'm killing everybody. Right. Fuck. There's no reason for me to be a good person anymore, at least in my mind, right? Like, and I was like, once that's called like confronting your shadow or whatever. It's like I understand this about myself, so now my job is to make sure that this shit doesn't happen. It's not making sure that my kids don't die during the apocalypse. It's making sure the apocalypse doesn't fucking happen, because I don't want the country to fall apart and us all go to war because the possibility of my kids dying just fucking skyrocketed. But if everything just maintains status quo, all I got to worry about is some sicknesses and shit, which suck. Don't get me wrong, that shit would suck. But
it's not a tank.
Yeah, I've mitigated some variables.
You've kind of ruled out the AK rounds coming in, dude. But I mean, I routinely joke about it, dude. But like, for a matter of fact, like during the height of the virus, the pandemic, bro, like when people were buying toilet paper and food, I 100% bought ammo.
Hmm.
That's what I spent my money on. And I joked about it a lot, but I was like, this goes tits up. I'm kicking my neighbor's door. Thanks for the food. And I did have to like come to the understanding where I'm like, most people aren't taking this as like a lighthearted joke, and I don't think I am either.
Hmm.
I was like, I think that's what I would be doing. And I'm like, like
So,
maybe,
have you
uh-oh.
do you watch these shows at all, bro?
No, I
Dude,
don't, man.
the last episode is probably the greatest cinematic thing I've ever fucking seen in my
I
life.
really want to watch it. I actually just got.
Can I ruin something for you?
Oof, I don't know if I want you to.
Dude, it's fucking great.
I just got HBO
It's
Max
so
again,
great.
and I was gonna start The Last of Us, and then I saw that
Oh
Band of
my
Brothers is
God.
on there.
All right, so
And,
this is what we're gonna do. One of our next episodes, we're gonna talk about episode 3 because
Okay.
it is the greatest thing I have ever fucking seen next to Bruno. And I don't know if you've ever seen
Oh
Bruno,
shit!
but on like a level of, I just watched. I can't ruin it for you. I can't.
Yeah,
in my
yeah, we
mind,
gotta pause on that.
I imagined a bunch of people watching this episode, resonating with this character, and then all of them losing their fucking mind.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm excited then.
That orienting principle in their brain just went like this.
Pop. It's like fuck, dude.
Yeah.
Well, no, and the reason why I brought that up, man, is the last SWAT raid that I was on. That's exactly what happened, dude. So there, I think I talked about it briefly on the last podcast, but I was assigned to breach and break and rake these rear Acadia doors. So I didn't have a break and rake tool. What I had was a Halligan because I had just breached this trailer in the back as well. But I came up to this rear Acadia door, dude, and I went to go swoop it, and all of us were speaking over comms, and we're like, okay, well, I believe that opening this rear Acadia door will give me view into the front living space of the home. Because it just made sense, dude. There's the front door on this side and the Acadia door on this side. And every other house I've seen, like there's a living room and a kitchen, maybe a half wall, like, you know what I mean? Like the space is open.
Which is horrible.
And bro, I
feng
fucking...
shui.
What's that?
It's horrible feng shui. You don't ever have doors and. Anyway,
Dude, it's like every house here has that. It's the Arizona Adobe shit, you know what I mean? Where you have to have a draft for the summers.
Yeah.
Like, fucking dude, I swing this Halligan, I fucking rake that window out, and they had a bunch of shit stacked up in there, so I'm just hooking it with the fucking Halligan, dude, and ripping it out of the house. And it was nothing like I thought it would be. Because there's all these plywood walls, dude, and curtains stapled to the fucking ceiling. Because it's a dope house. And they just like fucking, it's probably cold as shit in there. So they were like, well, let's just like fucking condense the heat around the goddamn pellet stove that we have in here. Bro, it fucking ruined my brain. I rip out this, dude, I never forget it because it was these laundry baskets full of just guaranteed stolen shit. Because one was full of fucking like little speakers and other little like chargers and shit, and the other one was like to the brim with sunglasses. I'm like, this is all stolen. They're not buying this many sunglasses, you know, dude. And ripped that shit out, and I was like, whoa! And I could feel this physical friction inside my head. Like I'm like, nope, not what it's supposed to be, Dad. Like this isn't what it's supposed to look like.
That I feel like that there's another abstraction there about like cognitive dissonance, where you believe one thing, you get shown evidence of another, and then you just ignore the evidence. You're like, no, it's this.
Well, and that's exactly what happened, to be honest with you, because I finished the break and rake, and then they called for me to come and join the entry team. So I moved rearward, so I went from the 3 wall back to the 1, the front of the house, rejoined the stick, and we make entry into the home.
That's such a weird way to say stack.
You know, and this is what the reference to civilian law enforcement now is permanently, and I don't understand where the flop was. And my whole like first probably fucking 4 months on SWAT, dude, like I couldn't process it. They were like, well, yeah, we'll just move the stick through the house,
Like, what stick?
take them as they come. And I was like,
where's the stick?
what? Yeah, I was like, what stick? Like, are you guys referring to the RAM or the Halligan? Like, what stick? Like, I'll move it. Like, I'll be part of the guys that move it. But it just means stack, and I don't know where that nomenclature comes from. I don't get it. I don't get it. It has to be some like fucking real civilian ass shit, where they're like, "Oh, that looks like a stick of dudes." Like I don't like a topographical map of it, Yeah. But anyway, dude, we make entry, and it was like I had to again reset my whole brain. I was like, I knew there was a cutoff, but going through the front door, I was like, nah, man, this is gonna be a bigger space on the front end. And it wasn't. The curtain that I saw right in front of my face on that fucking plywood bullshit wall was right in my face again. And I was like, this doesn't like and for the dudes that were on the initial entry, like obviously they're just having the immediate friction, but I'm having this like double friction, dude, where part of my brain's already sideways. And I'm like, oh fuck, dude. And then like to multiply that out, we SOP'd for that raid, like, hey, we don't we had been calling out for 2 hours now and breaking raking windows and ramming the front door open and shit, trying to get this person to come out. We're like, we don't know if someone's now pocketed into the rooms, so everything gets banged. Every single fucking room gets banged. Well, there's all these fucking false rooms. And so we're like trying to figure out, like, do we bang this shit? Like, how deep does this fucking thing go? Like, everyone's like on this weird pause in their heads,
Or if it's
you
even
could feel
plywood inside, it's not a sheet. So
Yeah.
you throw the bang in, it bounces off the wall, comes back.
Correct. Yeah, dude. And so everyone's like, fuck, man. And so we just got dudes fucking, if you plugged a door and you're holding it, like just dudes are just ripping down curtains left, right, and just revealing threat. Like the expansion inside the house was fucking really interesting. And then it's a dope house on top of that. So there was rooms that like you would fucking go to open, like breach it open and bang it, and the door would only fucking crack, dude. Because there's so much shit piled into these rooms. Like some of the rooms you couldn't see the floor at all. So it's just kicking the door until it wedges some of that shit open to where I can fucking sling draw my rifle, pull my sidearm, and climb over these mountains of shit. And I was like, this is fucking like the problem with CQB training is you're always in a fucking sanitized home, a shoot house. And then you get into a house and, well, I can't run my wall. I have to climb to my wall, dude. Like, yeah, the corner's not really clear because I can't see it. I can't fucking see the corner because there's mountains of laundry and stolen property and bicycles and fucking tables thrown on top of the laundry. Like just bizarre human behaviors, dude. And it's like, well, I can't do my 5 concepts if I can't even execute. Yeah, I got through the door, but I can't clear my corner yet, but I'm attempting to run my wall, and now my sector's the entire space because I'm partially in here alone because it's taking me 45 minutes to climb over the table. And now I'm communicating the whole time, but I'm my trifecta there in the center's fucked. And it's weird on the brain.
That doesn't sound fun.
No. Well, I mean, I love it. But it's very interesting what it's doing cognitively in our references of like, well, yes, you had a projection of the home. You get into the home, all of your training projections are saying do this, and then as you're attempting to execute on those things, you're having to remap the whole diagram.
But the algorithm that you're running or the bit that you're running is still going to work because of how fundamental those ideas are in CQB.
Correct. And then furthermore, it supports the establishment of SOPs. And this is what my argument was after that raid, and I talked with team leaders and shit. I was like, look, this is why we need SOPs for everything. You give every operator here an immediate fallback, a grid of what they should be doing. Because then
because then I can make predictions based on what I know you should be doing. So then I do certain things because of what you do. And
Right.
then the problem comes when it's not a problem so much, is that one of the things that you also have to do is you have to learn all of your teammates' faults. So
Yes.
where they are coming up short and then filling the gap for them. And then
Yes.
they, in theory, are doing the same for you, right? So where
Right.
I'm short sighted, they're covering the slack. So then you
Hmm.
can get this very cohesive, unit.
Right. And
But,
you know, we
but you have
were,
to do that with your fucking wife, too.
yeah, and that's tough. That's so much harder. Because like when you boil down tactical actions to their root, it really becomes like toddler instruction in my eyes. Like, don't move, stay there, sit down. You know, like when you can teach an ape to pull security, and we had an issue during this training that I was just at last week. Really good training, awesome time. But at the end, we were doing scenarios, and long story short, I had an officer surrender his sector of security, left it, left it,
Did he tell
and
anybody?
I'm say again.
Did he tell anybody?
No, he didn't say shit.
So,
So I'm in the front vehicle. I'm pinning the car in place, and then the majority of the team is rearward. So they're facing me, right? And we have another occupant to this vehicle. He exits. I'm in a blocking and active containment role. So my job is to be in as much of a covered position as I can in my vehicle, blocking traversal from that front of the occupied vehicle. Passenger just gets out of the suspect now vehicle, right? The now suspected vehicle. And I have to draw my pistol and like fucking because I notice like, hey, he's stepping out to no security. Like there was an officer there and now he's gone. Like he doesn't exist. I get out, I address, eventually call that member back. He resumes security. We pull that dude apprehend. But after that scenario, I brought it up to the group and was like, we need to talk about that you do not surrender a position until properly relieved. Like it's general order number one, man. Like, and I was like, this is tactical 101. And it ended up devolving really weird. And I think maybe I approached it without tact
probably.
because his reaction was horrendous. He was so offended by what I had to say and thought I was like picking a fight with him.
Well, you just basically said he was retarded.
Yeah, well, I mean, from a tactical element, yeah, I like the guy, but that was a really silly choice for someone that's declared to be an operator. That didn't make sense to me.
I am
Like in
not in disagreement with you.
yeah,
But I'm just saying that you probably didn't treat it with very much tact.
no, I don't think I did, and you know, I felt bad because I really like the guy. Like he's a good dude. He usually doesn't make any tactical errors. Like he's a pretty straight edge dude. But I mean, he was like, you know, if you're gonna talk shit, just say my fucking name. And like really, like, it was very like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like I'm not used to this type of a reaction. Like everyone on this team preaches like thick skin and fucking critique me, like make me better.
But then it
And then
comes
when
time
we
to make me better, and I get my
yeah, all of a sudden it's a fucking issue. And I was like, oh my god, dude, like this reminded me so much of why I love the military setting. Because when you're a team leader or a squad leader, like you make that correction, they might bitch about it on their own,
But they ain't
but
saying
they're not going to
shit.
do that shit.
They don't say shit to me. I
Yeah,
don't hear a
no,
fucking word.
because you're fucking right.
Hmm.
They might go back to their little hovel or their gypsy camp and be like, "Oh, fuck that, dude! Like, I had to give it up. Like, there was more work to be done. Like, wait, bitch! Like, you went to that position for a reason." And I don't know. I've been reflecting on it for the last 2 days now. I was like, I think I should have come at that different because I feel bad, but at the same time, like. I bet you he won't fucking relinquish security again. Like,
Or he might
you
do it
know?
despite you.
Right. Well, hopefully not that. Hopefully not that.
What I've
But it,
what I've learned after getting out of active duty is that that whole fucking shit. You catch more bees with honey than whatever the fuck this stupid shit is. There is you gotta I don't know. First on Schmidt does it very well.
mm,
He gives you a positive, and then he tells you what the problem is. And then he gives us the other positive, which is how we're going to fucking solve whatever problem this was.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I've been trying to implement that more. I just finally saw it emulated in a very structured way, and I was like, okay, that's exactly what I want to do.
But also, it's not disingenuous, and that's the main principle there, is that it doesn't feel like, hey man, overall we did really good. However, you fucked up, you fucked up over there, but like, dude, a win is a win.
Yeah.
Win is a win, dog. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's disingenuous shit.
Yeah.
And like, we talked briefly about it last week too, is that I feel like I have a little bit of a superiority complex when it comes to it, because I do feel proficient in what I do.
Mm.
I have a lot of evidence, and that was something that I meant to bring up earlier. But I have a lot of evidence to support that I'm right.
Mm.
And with that concept right there is what I'm getting at. What I wanted to bring up earlier, as far as relationships, is that is a PTSD marker point of terrible fucking relationship advice, to say like, no, I have a lot of evidence of being right. I have a lot of evidence, so like I'm probably right here too.
Mm-hmm.
But your tactical environment does not like convey very easily to like an argument with your spouse. Like,
it doesn't translate. It doesn't translate very well.
Not even the same language, man. So that's something I've been trying to correct in my own behaviors and my own mannerisms. But in a tactical sense, I spoke with my leadership a little bit last week, and was like, I don't feel like I fail much on a tactical side, but at a strategic and operational level, that's where I start to see holes in it. Like, I don't. Those are where my concepts start to dwindle a little bit. And I'm like, oh fuck! Like, I really get my piece of the pie, but that's my next growth point, is to see the whole fucking pie.
Mm.
And to see, like, well, if I put my pawns here, what can my rook do? What can my knight do?
For sure. And the next time we talk, we're going to go a little bit more in depth in some of the way in which these informational structures like talk to each other.
Okay.
And the next podcast we're going to review some memes, or review some reels, and then talk about the memes that are inside of these reels.
Ooh. So kind of pry into those.
All right. Later.
Goodbye.